Welcome to 10x Femme, conversations with real women who are achieving success on their own terms. My name is Danielle, and my mission is to motivate and ignite you to execute on your goals.
Righty-ho. Sian Jones, welcome to 10x Femme. Thank you for joining me this lovely evening. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm great. I couldn't think of anywhere else I'd rather be this evening, especially since it's now raining outside. So there you go.
You just gave me the compliment and took it away.
I did. There you go. You're right up there next to the weather.
Thanks. So I'm so glad that we finally managed to slot this time in. I know you are the busiest woman in the world.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you.
So it's a real privilege, and we've got lots to get through this evening.
Perfect.
So let's start. You're currently the CEO of Correla. I know that it became the sister company of Exoserve in March 21 last year.
Yeah.
I will try to pretend I know exactly what you do, but in layman terms, can you explain what Exoserve was and what Correla does now?
Yeah, perfect. So it's probably worth going back in time. So I became a non-executive director of Exoserve back in 2015-16, and I had no intention at that time of becoming Exoserve's chief exec. One thing happened after another, and then that felt like the right thing to do, and I was going to stay for a couple of years and do a bit of a corporate turnaround, transformation activity, get the company on its feet after a difficult period, and then move on. There was something really, really magical about not just the people inside Exoserve, but the position that it had inside the market as a whole. And I always saw this massive potential to unlock products that help the market. Exoserve's in the middle of the energy sector, by the way, but products that would help the sector, knowledge that could be unlocked, ways of working that could be better, and really a whole raft of benefits that would come from a sort of commercialised private sector. And yet Exoserve was sort of wrapped inside this tight regulatory boundary for very good reasons, but it did prevent that innovation from flourishing. And so I started a process of trying to break out of the regulatory confines, massively arrogant, failed epically. I'm just going to change the entire governing model of the UK. But never really gave up. And I could have given up, could have left and got a job in an easier sector, but never really gave up. And then back to pen to paper, a strategy to try and bring about the same outcome, but through a different means. And we explored a whole raft of different options. And then after 12 months of lobbying and effort and talking and convincing and explaining to everyone from government to industry to customers, we finally completed basically a restructure of Exoserve and Corella into two different companies, with the majority of sort of capability going into Corella, technical capability specifically. And then Exoserve sold Corella in its entirety to a wonderful, wonderful private equity company called North Edge, and a Manchester-based PE firm who have now owned us since March 2021. And with that separation came, the complete freedom of Corella to operate as a technology company. We do software as a service products on one side and then managed service programs and deliveries on the other side. So that's us. We're now a tech company.
My mind is blown. And when you say energy services, it's more specifically around gas or both?
Both. So our heritage is software that supports the gas side of the market, but increasingly we do both. And the strategy over the long term will be to focus on tech that supports decarbonisation. And, that could go one of two ways. You only have to spend time looking at government policy to know it's either hydrogen 1 minute or it's heat pumps in the home the next. And the reality is it's going to be a mix of both. And we're going to be right in the middle of supporting both.
Amazing. I definitely want to pick up on the statement that you don't give up a little bit later. I think that's been a theme in your life generally. You're very, very young. You are very young. You're a spring chicken.
I'm not young anymore. We had this conversation. I'm feeling old.
You are basically a child. So my mind is...
It used to be true that I was always the youngest in the room. Now I've started realising I'm not. And do you know what? It blows my mind. I was like, oh, I grew up. Nobody told me this was going to happen. I'm going to start hiring bright young things and sponsoring bright young things. And I'm not the bright young thing anymore, but thank you. I'll take the compliment anyway.
But at a C-suite level, you were definitely probably one of the youngest.
Wow.
Having looked at the stats, you definitely are. So walk me through rapidly your entire career. Like, what did that path look like? Obviously, I worked for you at some point.
Gosh, that was way back.
A long time ago. Not too long, because remember we were both really young.
I'm still young.
Just a couple of years ago. Walk me through everything. So did you have a vision when you were a child? Because you seem like the kind of woman that would, what you wanted to do. If not, what did you do at uni? And kind of walk me through that journey.
So my first memory of knowing what I wanted to do is I wanted to be an astronaut. And I don't know where that came from, but I've got a strong memory. And but the one that stayed around for the longest and the one that I was most passionate about is I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and that was totally off the back of Top Gun, and I think it probably says something about which character did I identify with the most. It was Kelly McGillis, wasn't it, who was the sort of sexy, feisty lady. I mean, she wasn't exactly a sort of wallflower. She was a gung-ho woman with a motorbike. I mean, I could have totally identified with her. And yet I didn't. I identified with Tom Cruise. I absolutely wanted to be a fighter pilot, to fly jets, to be Top Gun. And I was quite obsessed about that film for a while. And I really thought that's what I would do. And I remember my dad saying to me once, and this probably isn't a lesson for fatherhood really, but I think he meant it with the best intent, is he said to me, it's just not very ladylike and I should look at something else to do. I think what he might have been trying to tell me is that it was a hard profession for women to get into back then. It still is now, but a hard profession then. And maybe I might want to moderate my thinking. I'm not really a plan B kind of person, but it definitely had an impact. And I wonder to this day whether, I would have liked doing that, would have enjoyed doing that. But anyway, so if you'd have asked me back then, would you like to be a businesswoman at sort of age 11 or something, I'd have probably laughed my head off. I didn't even know what that was. It was definitely not something I aspired to. In fact, now when I talk to my stepkids, no one aspires to work in an office. It's the strangest thing, really. But anyway, I sort of preferred the arts over the sciences at school. And I was particularly philosophy and sociology. I really, really loved philosophy, that sort of logical argument. And I was going to do that at university. And a very smart teacher basically sat me down and gave me the first lesson of, do you understand what not having any money looks like? Because you're not going to have any money or any freedoms of any kind if you become a philosophy major. You need to do something where you can get paid. And whether that was right, wrong, or different, I don't know. But he was also very helpful with a follow-up point, which is, he said there's a new field burgeoning called artificial intelligence, which is basically philosophy, but you have to do some computing with it. He totally missold it to me. So I went off to university and did AI. And there was only really 2 universities in the UK that did it at the time. There was one in Scotland, I think it must have been Edinburgh, and then Sussex. And so off I trotted down to Brighton. I had a merry old time on the coast. It was great. I was a DJ for a while and made a lot more money than your average student. And I did AI. I almost dropped out after the first year. It was hardcore computer science and I was largely an art student. I had no idea how I'd ended up doing that. And I thought, oh, God. And then whether or not, it's an explanation of how left brain and right brain can switch over, I don't know. But after just a bit of persistence and back to that not giving up equation, something just flipped. By the time I then had finished my degree, all I wanted to do is code. Don't give me any of this arty-farty stuff to do. Just leave me in a room till midnight with my laptop so I can tip-tap away trying to solve problems and fix coding issues. I went completely the other way. And so then I joined it was pretty classic after that, really. I joined the graduate scheme at what was Anderson Consulting and then became Accenture. Went off and did my training, came back and did my few years as a management consultant. And that was back before they tried to become a tech company. So they really did hire sort of English graduates and geography graduates and then send them on a 2-week coding course and expect them to be able to actually do anything. Whereas I actually could code. So it was like, I don't know, honeybees around a honeypot. Every project, it was like, well, Sian can actually code, so we're going to give her all this work. And so I loved that. I didn't like, though, the sort of production line thing about these sorts of firms. You go in one shape, you stay the same shape, you come out the other shape. And maybe that's grossly unfair, but I felt like I was on a kind of production line, and I'm just too not rule following enough, which we'll get back to, I'm sure, in another question. But so I then got picked up by a sort of fast track program they were trialing at BT. And I absolutely loved BT. I was there for just under, I think, about 11 years. And I did everything you can imagine there. So I came and ran big programs, big sort of transformations and turnarounds, kept getting promoted. Eventually had my big break to become a sort of proper director or what they used to call them, corporate contracts, or whatever they were, where your salary wasn't published anymore and it all got secret squirrel. That was the point back in the old career days where you'd made it. And I don't think any of that nonsense exists now. And I got to run my first proper P&L, a big P&L, and to become a product manager, a sort of product director. And I moved from technology into products. And, it's a transition that I assume everyone can make. I loved every minute of it. The idea of, hang on a minute, you build tech that people want to buy, and you build tech with stuff that people need, and that tech can change how companies run and people do their day-to-day life. It's like, wow, I want to do that. I want to build more and more stuff like this. And then I worked out that you could price it a certain way and market it a certain way. And I just absolutely loved the whole concept of product development. And I sort of assume every techie can make that transition. It turns out they can't, actually, but I passionately loved every minute of it, and I think made the transition pretty well. And then from there, ended up running a subsidiary company that BT had acquired, an American company called Infinet. That had become a turnaround situation by the time I'd gone in. And I, again, loved every minute of working out what to do with the company, what bits to leave open, what bits to close down, where to grow, what not to do, how to get out of contracts, get into contracts. And another sort of big standalone, P&L holding job. And so all of that prepared me quite well, really, for moving into, my first proper CEO role without the protections of a mothership, parent company over the top. And so that sort of brings you up to the current day.
You're missing out Clarke's.
Oh, gosh. Do you know what? I always miss out Clarke's. I shouldn't say that, right. So I think everyone has, like the body language people will say, look, she looked off to the right. That means something. I think everyone has a job which is it's like that breakup. It's not necessarily a bad breakup, but it's kind of a memorable breakup for a number of reasons. So I'll summarise it like this, because I was having a conversation with someone who's in a similar position the other day, who I was giving a bit of advice to. Sometimes a dream job comes along, and on paper it's everything you want to do, and you upheave your life for it. You move location, if you've got a family, you move your family, and it's great on paper, and it's going to be great. And the first couple of months are great, and you're like, oh, this is my dream job. And then it's just not. so it ends up being quite dysfunctional. And I think, we've all had that kind of job, and it's not to speak badly of the company, because actually I think the company's amazing and I loved them, and I think that was why I sort of reconcile it with being like a breakup. It's like you're looking at your partner going, we should be a great couple. Why are we not a great couple? Why is this fit not working? And so you overinvest in it actually for longer than you should do, and it's just not a good fit. And I can summarise it by, I think they wanted someone like me. I think they wanted a shake-up. And then I don't think they wanted a shake-up. And And I think I thought it was something, and I think it ended up not being something. And so it was a really valuable lesson in the end, which is the job process is like the worst internet dating app. Everybody's sort of bringing their best fake self into the equation. And now, years later, I've hired so many people, of which you still get like a 50% success rate. So, if anyone's out there with a good entrepreneurial idea, it's like, we've got to do something about this hiring process. It's so hit and miss. It's hit and miss for the candidate. It's hit and miss for the company. And so I did a couple of years, anyway, to answer your question, I did a couple of years in the middle, basically running all of Clarke's IT globally, and then it was all of their digital globally, and then I also became the responsible for the overall company strategy. But in the end, we just didn't want to take the company in the same direction.
Well, I remember going into the Clarke store on my high street and saying, one of my good friends is your CIO, give me my refund.
I loved the
That's
shoes. That's
me saying that I shopped in Clarke's for my shoes.
But I tried to make you, I remember that. I became a massive fan of the product. You know what, that is so true. You sent me
vouchers, I remember.
Yeah. I think you have to love the product of the company you work for. And at the time, the guy who was doing the design work of their products, I'm not sure if he's still there or not, he had this vision to create this sort of more expensive, not expensive, not necessarily a good thing strategically, but just this really high quality version of Clarke shoes. And I think for the customer base, that was never going to land. But the shoes were just glorious, and you could only get them in a tiny fraction of stores or online, or if you sort of knew someone who knew someone. It was like this secret other line of shoes. And but they were great. I've still got loads of them in my cupboard.
Yeah, they did some good comfy boots.
There you go, straight back to comfort.
Okay, so what would you say were the characteristics that you had that kind of got you through that entire journey? And do you now look for people, when you hire them, that are a replica of yourself or different?
It's a very timely question, that one. It's on my mind quite a lot. So I think I have a handful of traits that definitely help. And the two I would call out I'd call out three, actually. One, I'm an extremely curious person and able to turn that curiosity into application and results. That gives you a lot of different onward abilities, the ability to reinvent yourself, the ability to adapt to the situation, the ability to learn, move roles, change companies, just boom, over and over again. It doesn't really faze you. You can shift and keep reshifting. I think coupled with that, I'm pretty comfortable with criticism and learning. Don't get me wrong, I'll push back if I disagree, but that ability, I'm curious about myself as much as the situations. That allows you to learn from each of those transitions and dynamics. This is going to end up being more than three, bear with. Then I know, it turns up on all sorts of tests, but I've now seen it in practice. I'm definitely a very tough person, tough on myself, tough on others, tough on the situation. Forgiving too, to a point, as in I forgive myself, but I do expect myself to have learned and not repeat it again next time and move on. There's a toughness to it, which I think, is part of that resilience factor, the ability to learn and to be tough, to shift, I think is all part of that resilience equation. I think the bit, so do I look for that in other people? Not enough. Do you know what I end up looking for in other people? Is I end up looking for potential. And somewhere deep down inside me, I believe everyone is capable of the same life transitions as I've been on. And, we could spend a whole nother session getting into childhood and personal growth from that. But, nearly everyone in a senior leadership position has had a story of kind of immense pain and recovery. Otherwise, they wouldn't have developed all of that mental toughness and mental resilience. But my memory of myself, and when I look in the mirror, I don't see the toughness bit, I see the potential bit. I'm always like, But tomorrow I could be 10 times better, and the day after I could be 20 times better. And my absolute faith that I'll just keep growing and improving and learning, it's like it's a complete given. And I believe that is true of everyone else. So when I hire, I tend to see people's potential plus their reality, and hire then on one plus the other. And you'd think that sounds great. A CEO who hires for potential must be developing people. I'm starting to see it as a bit of a disability, actually. Let me give you a good example of one of my best friends. He'll hate being on video, so I'm not going to name him. But my friends of my friends will know who I mean. So it's basically an air steward. And I think he's one of the smartest people I know. He should be basically head of cabin crew by now. Like, just out and out exceptional, I think. Brain, ability to deal with people, difficult situations, everything. Every time, we've had a few glasses of wine, whatever, we're sort of putting the worlds to right, and I'm probably on the wrong side of giving him a bit of a lecture. It's always, but you could do it. You'd be so much better than everyone else I've met or come across in that job. Oh, why don't you want to do it? Like, you've almost got an obligation to put your talent out there. And he's always dead straight up with me. Yeah, it's just, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to deploy your talent? Like, I don't understand. It does not compute. Every day I'm trying to deploy what I've got into my job. I don't understand why you don't. Years we've been having this conversation. And I must say, I've grown to really, really, really respect him, because he just doesn't want to do it. It's not a complicated answer. He just doesn't want to. He knows what it is. He's weighed it up and he doesn't want to do it. If I was hiring him because he has potential like this and then actual experience like this, I would hire him. And yet he would be the worst hire for me to make, because he doesn't want to do it. And so then you bring that into, current times. Most people who are turning up for an interview with me, they want to do it. Well, they think they do. Whether they really want to do what it takes is a different thing. Whether they actually have the capacity to do what it takes is another thing. But most of them, without fail, will have the potential. If the will is there and the skill can be uplifted, then the potential is there, plus the previous experience. And then what you find out is, not everybody has either the will or the will to want to put in what it takes, or the will to be humble enough to go back and learn what they need to learn to fill the gaps. And so what they try and do then is trade off what they know. Just trade off what they know, and that potential bit never really gets realised. Plus, I underestimate how much I need to put in to helping them to realise that potential. And so, when you end up in the job of CEO, it's an interesting thing, because you have to ask yourself, where is your time being spent? Because if it's spent getting someone's potential from here to here, and it could be spent developing a new product or speaking to a customer or landing a deal, or helping those teams doing that and revenue generating work, then is that the right place to spend your time? Because your job is to grow the profitability of the company, typically grow the top line, grow the bottom line. And so, was that the right hire? Or should I just have hired someone who knew how to do it? Then I didn't have to make that investment and could have spent the time over there. So I'm really quite thoughtful about this at the moment, because it speaks to my value set to hire for potential. But actually, I'm not sure it ends up being good for the individual, and I'm not sure it ends up being good for me. So it's a timely question, and I'm sorry I don't really have all the answers, but those are my latest reflections.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think what you said earlier about there being an entrepreneur out there to solve the problem of, matching hires with corporates, it comes down to motivation and mindset, because at the end of the day, most of our skills have taken us as far as we're going to get at this current moment of time. So unless you identify as a learner, someone who's going to constantly be upskilling, seeking feedback, etc., sideways, up, upwards, downwards, etc., then you're just not going to make it. And some people just don't want to work, 15 hours a day.
I know, that's it, right? That's it. It's and also the to learn efficiently takes a lot of practice. So I realised I've been learning how to learn for decades, and now I do it pretty efficiently. I mean, I said to before my current CISO, my chief security officer, who's fab, before she worked for me, I had a string of different security related individuals, and for one of them, I thought, all my sort of, can I swear on this? Can I say bullshit? Mm-hmm. All my bullshit radar is going off here, but I don't actually know enough about what you're talking about. Even though I'm a techie, I don't know enough about what you're talking about to know. My radar's going off, but I can't prove it. And I remember I needed a rest anyway, so I thought, I'm going to take a stack of security textbooks like this. And I took myself off to Dubai on my own, and I just sat there on a sunbed and I read the lot right front to back. And it took about 5 days. You might go, that's the most ridiculous thing to invest your time in. I came back and I was like, boom. Do you know the bit, The Matrix, at the end where he goes, he's about halfway through, he goes, I know Kung Fu. I came back, I was like, I know security. And my bullshit radar was right. So anyway, it's your capacity and willingness to learn, I think, is a huge part of your success. Not that I would necessarily go around homework checking everyone's jobs like that on a regular basis, but
that's amazing. I mean, that we could have a whole other podcast about the skills of learning stuff, but I'm obviously, as you know, like you in terms of being curious and always upskilling. So when I was working for you back in BT, I think maybe 10 years ago or so now.
I think it's longer than that, yeah.
I remember being in certain meetings with you thinking, harsh but fair, harsh but fair. That was kind of my my phrase for you in my head. And I remember, and this is down to me and not you, thinking that you behaved like a lot of men in leadership. And I think it's taken quite a long time for women in general and men and others to kind of wrap their head around the fact that women can have traits that are strong, etc., without associating them with being manly or etc. Have you ever faced any kind of criticism for your no bullshit way of leadership? I know you've always expect more of people. You like momentum, you like progress. And you pretty much stop at nothing to kind of get shit done.
Yeah. I am. Do you know what is that? This is also such a timely question. Yeah, I think I'd be lying to myself if I haven't ended up in situations because I'm a woman. I can think of a couple where I got in for that reason, I think. Don't get me wrong, definitely good enough to do the job, but in for that reason. And I have to say, I was like, whatever reason I get in, I don't mind, because I'm going to show you how good I am when I'm inside the door. And now running a company, I care about actual diversity. So diversity of thought, of background, of opinion, of strategy, because actual diversity gives you better decisions. And I do buy that research. And so if I apply that to myself, I find it quite interesting. So you're going to stick me in a team with a bunch of other guys and I'm going to bring diversity. And I'm like, really? I'm not sure I bring diversity with a bunch of other sport playing, gung-ho, stop at nothing guys. I think I'm going to not bring any diversity to that discussion at all. I might be a woman, but unless we're selling feminine hygiene products, I'm not sure I'm able to, particularly bring that to bear in the product development conversation. So, this question of what are we trying to bring into business? And definitely, I think you want what I call both sort of hard and soft diversity. I think you need actual diversity. I think people need to look at someone and go, I see that person in me, be that gender or race or any of the dimensions, disability. I think someone needs to see something in them that resonates as a role model. But then after that, I think it is diversity of thought that comes from diversity of background, that comes from diversity of experience. And sometimes I think we conflate the two. Just because I'm a woman, I'm going to give you a different perspective than that other gung-ho guy over there, because we look quite similar in practice. And And then the other bit I sort of struggle with the whole gender, particularly diversity question at work, is because I believe in the concept wholeheartedly, but I have never thought about my gender in the workplace. So as a leader of a company, how do I bring gender diversity conversation to the table when I have never asked myself, never thought about, never considered my behaviour in the context of gender? I've thought about it in the context of competence. I've simply looked around, decided what's needed to get on, what's needed to get the job done, and potentially mirrored some of those behaviours. So if some of those were more masculine considered traits, then that's probably me working out how to get the job done. And I think you would see my style slightly different now, not because I've done anything consciously, but just the social norms have evolved. What you need to do to get things done has changed. So in many ways, I'm sort of ambidextrous like that. But my point of being, how do you have a conversation about something you've never thought of when everyone's looking at you thinking you must have really thought about that? And I have to be honest and say I haven't really. I've just got up in the morning and said, how do I be good? In fact, how do I be better than good? How do I be excellent? And if that has meant a bunch of traits have manifested, then that's probably the reason. I do worry now then that we've this conflation between this sort of hard and soft type of diversity is going to get us to actually some women like me that are quite masculine, people from different ethnic backgrounds, ethnicities, but from the same background in effect. They went to the same public school. We see this in the conversation about government. Like, is it really a different background? Like, who are we representing? What backgrounds are we bringing into this diversity equation? And then to bring the other, another sort of dimension to it, so you can tell I'm much more confused than I am clear-headed on this topic, and I'd rather just be authentic about that. The other point I'd bring in was really recently I was in Barcelona for the weekend, and I had the real privilege actually to spend a bit of time with someone who introduced themselves as being non-binary, and I have never actually managed to, because no one's ever mentioned it to me. I figured that's probably the way someone identifies, but someone's not actually told me in such a warm, opening way that I could actually almost have a dialogue with them about that. And what was really fascinating is I spent the whole time trying to see the male traits and the female traits and trying to work out which way they rolled. And at the end of it, I came out and thought, I couldn't do it. I couldn't see anything distinctly sort of feminine or masculine, and this person was clearly very comfortable in their own skin. And I just thought, that's the point, isn't it? They're not bringing gender to the table. They're just bringing them. And I thought, wow, either this is the point when I get it, or maybe I still haven't got it. But I still came away with such a positive experience from that, which is I thought in my own way, I would say if I could say I identify with something, I would say outside of work I identify with being female, inside work I identify with being non-binary. I don't identify with being masculine or feminine. I just identify with the job and the task. So it's such a complicated topic because that comes with all sorts of pros and cons. So how do you help women in business who identify with being women and are struggling in business for reasons of being feminine? So I it's such a complicated topic, and I still feel it's the one area where I just underperform. Like I honestly don't know the ways in which I should be helping. There's a huge desire to help, in my case, a huge desire to create a diverse company and a huge desire to do the right thing that paves the way for that. But you can tell I'm on such a learning curve for myself, such a learning curve. So to your original question of, do people say I bring masculine traits to work? I'm pretty sure they do behind my back. I think the world might have moved on since then, but people don't necessarily identify those traits with a masculine gender anymore, which I think is a good thing. And I think I've probably softened. I bring a lot more humour and warmth to work than I did before, but that doesn't change the fact I do want results. I want results for me, and I want results for people around me, and that is a non-negotiable.
Everything you just said is so powerful. And I think
I feel like I say the wrong thing all the time.
What
on this
makes
topic.
you a phenomenal leader is the fact that you're so self-aware and you're so willing to kind of be authentic with what you know and what you don't know. And I'm laughing and smiling because my cat is meowing and I locked her in the room upstairs.
My cat's here, my dog's over there.
I don't know how she got out. I literally put all the water and everything upstairs and shut the door.
That's what makes cats.
I need a camera.
Dog would be on the other side of the door. I've got a dog and a cat. Dog would be on the other side of the door barking, saying, "Why am I here?"
Yeah.
The cat's just working their way out quietly,
she's managed to distract me. Anyway, so yes, I think that's amazing, and I think, you know, you just having this conversation with me and sharing that will allow you to, you know, virtually mentor a lot of other women out there. And leaders in terms of kind of being honest with their kind of I don't know, help me type situation. Mrs. Jones, so tell me, what has been your biggest regret? Mm-hmm. What would you have, if any, because you might not have any, and your biggest challenge, and what would you have done differently?
Do you know what? I genuinely, this is going to sound like such a cliche. I have regrets in the moment. So, and I'll come back to the typical shape of regrets in the moment. But without a doubt, it's back to that learning mindset. Without a doubt, everything that was a momentary regret has ended up becoming something that shaped the person that I've become. So I know that's an epic cliche, but that really is my experience. So, and actually, when you start to believe that, it's helpful because then you just don't bother looking backwards very much unless it is for reasons of systematic learning. I definitely don't look backwards and beat myself up about the past. And I know because I've had people in my life recently spend their whole time looking back and thinking about the past and living in the past. And I realise I don't do that because I look at them going, why do you do that? It's just like, A, it's an epic waste of your time because you can't change the past, but B, it'll make you feel very good. And you're doing it in a kind of beat yourself up kind of way. So you're not even learning anything from it. So so you can see from those three dimensions, I do the opposite. I mean, the only reason I ever look backwards is for, you know, learning collateral in some way, shape or form. I am bothered by things in the past that I don't understand. And so if I'm going to look back for reasons of not solving a present day problem, it's because I'm bothered by unresolved stuff. Like I like to have a rationale for it. And so, you know, in romantic relationships in the past, that's been a huge problem for me because you just can't explain some stuff that people do. You can't. And it doesn't matter how much you try and apply rationality to it, you'll never really understand. And honestly, if I'm going to take one thing to my grave, it's that sometimes you just can't understand why people don't do it. It's back to that potential thing I was talking about with my friend. I swear to God, my last living moment would be, why is he not chief of cabin crew? Like, just like, why? And I
hope you don't feel that way about me.
No, not at all. You are definitely someone who's striving to fulfill your potential. Most definitely. So I think where things can't logically be pieced together, I can kind of look backwards, but otherwise I'm always looking forward. So therefore, I don't think you can have regrets if you're not a look backward person. I don't think that scientifically holds true. But where I have regrets in the moment are, and this might sound like a cliche, but when I'm in it, I definitely don't see the pattern. Like I spend too long making certain decisions, and they're usually decisions about people. And I just go round and round and round stuff, and I kind of flip-flop on stuff, and I can get very upset by stuff. Like, people fascinate me. I just can't work out people. I think I've got quite a robotic, logical brain, and people are just not robots. It's like that's a surprise to me every day. People don't behave rationally. And also, I think it's muddied by this potential thing all the time. I think I've got this sort of complete war going on between potential and reality, or between where someone could be played but where they want to be played, between, you know, is their performance my problem or their problem? And And so I can go round and round those things for too long, and I drive myself mad over some decisions. I think in reality, because I wouldn't be where I am if actually those things were a long time. I think because I usually make decisions very quickly, it feels like a long time, but in practice, I'm probably making decisions at an effective and reasonable pace. It's just for me, it feels hard. And so if I'm going to have any regrets in the moment, it's usually, why did it take me that long? Why did I do that in the first place? Gosh, that was a waste, or like there's some inefficiency about it that I regret. And there's some personal pain that gets caused by those decisions that I regret. I take quite a lot of care and attention when I'm negatively impacting someone else. Let's say someone's not working out in a role. I always say there's a really, really big difference. And in fact, if this is a life lesson for anyone, here it is. There's a really big difference between the what and the how. So the what you need to do is the decision you need to make, however much you don't like the decision. How you then execute the decision is everything about your ethics and your values. So if a fairly new thing for me, I've always lived my life like this and led like this. But I'm now starting to realise I need to look for this in other leaders, which is your ability to make the decision. Forget the torturous cycle that it might take me to get there for a minute, but I will make the hard decision. And I need other people to make the hard decision. That shouldn't be a question. That is a fundamental part of leadership. And if you're not willing to make the hard decision, you're not a leader. You're possibly a manager at best. Then what makes you a good leader or a bad leader is then how you execute that decision. You know, if I think about the one single dimension of leadership of, you know, do you let someone go or not? Once that decision is made, I'm not talking about a serious underperformer who was like a total waste of space from day one they started. In fairness, I don't think you should invest much time in that, or people who lied on their CV or anything, just, no, goodbye. But for those people who've been loyal to you, they've done a job for you, it's just whatever reason the shape of something has changed. There's nothing I wouldn't do for that person to help them transition. There's nothing I wouldn't help by way of, recommending them into jobs that are a great fit. Being there as a sounding board on that journey, helping them with a good package so that they've got the time to think and breathe and move on. But the what you need to do is clear. The how you execute it is everything about your values. And actually the companies, in the end, people don't hate companies, because they let them go. They hate companies because they treated them like shit through the process. And, if you really take that to its extreme, it can often be a beautiful parting of supporting someone in a transition in life that's beneficial for them and for the company. It's not always like that, and it takes two very mature people for that to be the case. But I've had some really beautiful experiences with people that no longer work for me. And that is all about the how you execute something, not the what. And it's the same whether you're talking about the acquisition of a company. It's the same about whether or not you're talking about a restructure. We spend so much time conflating, again, back to this word of conflation, we do it as humans all the time. We spend so much time conflating the how and the what. Well, maybe we shouldn't do it that way. Well, that's because we don't really want to execute the how, or we don't know how to do it, so we're going to change the what. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, we were clear what we needed to do. How come we're now doing something else? It's like, because we don't know how to execute it. And we're forever mucking about with those two dimensions, and I think you've got to keep them totally, totally separate. So I know your original question was, do I have any regrets? No, because I don't look backwards. Yes, because I spend too much time cycling some decisions, but it helps me get to the what. And then once I've made that what decision, I put all my energy into how. How do I make this a great experience? Whatever it is that I'm doing a great experience for people. And so my only regret is I spend too long on getting to the what decision, but at least I separate the what and the how when it's done.
Do you know what I heard there when you were talking about the challenge in you kind of going back and forth with people specifically, is that maybe it's not you kind of being kind of robotic or seeing people as non-robots. I think you've got a lot of empathy, and maybe your expectation of people, because you feel like these people that you've hired have the potential and that's what you've seen in them, when they then don't live up to that immediately, you feel this kind of nurtured role to be like, just like with your air steward friend, to be like, but can you not see how great you can be?
I can feel you in that job.
Yeah, exactly. So the dilemma is because you feel like you can help grow this individual, but assuming in the role that you have, it's near impossible to kind of give that much dedicated time to kind of mentoring. I mean, I'm sure you mentor a lot of people. Just even in this conversation, I'm being mentored by you, but having to do that dedicatedly to employees who need more time than just, you know, an hour's conversation must be quite challenging.
Well, it's also back to that. What is your job as a CEO?
Yeah.
You know, everyone sort of, I think, has this glamorized job, you know, idea. You're meant to sit there and mentor other people. What, like 24/7? My job is to mentor? Actually, no, my job is to grow the company, and I can give so much time to mentoring. And then if that person isn't growing, I need to get someone who can do the job. Like that's harsh, but that's true. My job is not to mentor. That is a means to growing potential, to achieve the ambition of the company, and that is the delivery of the company strategy, which typically is growth. And so, you know, it's hard. This empathy thing is interesting because I would have said, you're one of a long list of people to say to me, I've got lots of empathy. I would have sworn blind. I was, you know, emotionally disabled in some way. I had no empathy. I would have sworn this all the way through my life. But just so many people have said to me, I've got lots of empathy now. I'm starting to wonder if it might be true. But I don't think I really understood what empathy was. And I said to someone once, I've got lots of empathy for animals. Like, I struggle to get into the office if there is too much roadkill on the side of the road. So if there are too many dead deer or bunnies or badgers, or it's like I end up just very emotionally drained from seeing that much death on the way into work. And I can feel it. I can almost feel the deer trying to jump across the road and getting hit. Like, I mean, I could like in here, right? So, and I was like, how can I have that much empathy for animals and not for humans? And then someone said to me, yeah, you can't. You do have that much empathy for humans.
you do.
And so I think I take all this responsibility for people. That's where that too long on that washing machine cycle is I feel responsible for them. I feel like I should have known. I should have seen it coming. I should have said something differently. I should have helped more. I should have. And one of the other things that's on my personal development plan, and I've always got a pretty rich personal development plan, but the other one at the moment is I have to stop taking accountability for other people. And the corollary of that is you got to help people take personal accountability. The greatest gift you can give someone is personal accountability. And to do that, it's how do you make them know they're accountable? How do you give them enough space to be accountable? And that means taking accountability for the upsides and the downsides of the decisions they make. How do you give them enough space to fail in small ways so that they learn? But just clarity of accountability. When I look inside my own company, that's the single biggest thing we've got to crack, which is who's accountable for this? Either no one raises their hand or like 6 people raise their hand. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. And you know, somewhere on the line, I realised, wow, that's the gap in my leadership style, is in taking accountability for others, for all the best intents, I'm stopping them from taking accountability. And in doing so, I've underdeveloped the muscle, the leadership muscle of making sure accountability is clear.
That's interesting. So you're saying obviously that being a CEO isn't your core responsibility is not mentorship, although it's part of the role at some level. So walk me through that work week. What is a CEO? What are you supposed to do?
I got stuck producing, didn't I, when you asked me that question last time?
What are you supposed to do on paper, and what do you actually do? Like what? Yeah.
So, in simple terms, I think the role of a CEO is to imagine the future, to see what the gap is, and to deploy the resources you have to close the gap. And so it's that simple. So let's focus on what a bad CEO is across those 3 dimensions. A bad CEO can't envisage a bright enough future. So if you've got shareholders, a big enough future, one with enough return on investment. We often forget that someone put money in. You know, I always like to personalise it to people. Where do you think your savings and your pension plan is? You know, that thing you're going to retire on that you desperately need, that's invested in something. So let's not get too socialist about this. You need that investment to grow or you can't retire, which means companies like me that have a pension fund invested in them need to get a return on your investment. You're an investor in me and you want to see that return. So am I visioning big enough to get a return on investment? And actually, that's the board's job. The board's job is to assess, is the vision big enough to get the return? And then my job as CEO, having done that visioning, so if I'm a bad one, I can't think that big. That's the problem. And by the way, you don't need to be the one. You might employ a team of people if that's not your strength, but you know it needs to get done. So as the CEO, your job is to get that vision big enough and then to work out what is that gap and then how to deploy the resources you've got and the resources you don't yet have to closing the gap. Pure and simple. That's it. So then you say, well, where do things like mentoring come into it? You're like, right, well, now we're into how do we close the gap territory. So it's really hard to hire. It's really expensive to hire. You know, the really brutal side of mentorship, don't get me wrong, I actually really enjoy it. That's why I do it. And I really take a lot of joy from seeing people get on. But we're not talking about my personal value set or my personal preferences. We're talking about business. So why do business people mentor? Either it's inside the company and you think that that's going to get them contributing more faster, and therefore they're going to be a more valuable resource that's going to help you close more of that gap. Or if they're not in your company, then frankly, you're interviewing them. I mean, that's what all mentoring is about. You're sussing out for the future. You're creating a phone book of people that you might try and call on in the future to come join you and close that gap. I challenge anyone who don't get me wrong, it's back to a lot of people do it because they personally enjoy it. But, you know, I have this expression in business which is about, look, it's okay to enjoy stuff and cash the check at the same time. If you're giving away too much of your time and not cashing the check with that time, you're not being very efficient. So why can't I enjoy mentoring something there's your cat again? God love her.
I don't even,
I think you need to give up.
I had to keep a straight face. See, I really don't understand how she got out of that room again.
I know that cat. So it's actually turned around to be full frontal into the film.
I'm so annoyed at her. I don't even want to stroke her.
She's going to show you her butt now as well as like a total kind of reminder that you haven't shown enough. Just cuddle her and sit her on your lap. You just need to give that up. She's staying.
Give up. I give up.
But I don't see why you can't both really enjoy mentoring for personal reasons and also it's okay. It's the world's worst kept secret. You're using it as a way of, you know, making sure you've got the maximum amount of resources present and future that you can use to close the gap. And, you know, so if you can envisage big enough, and your board should be pushing you to do that, and then you're good at identifying what's missing to close the gap between that and where you're trying to get to. And then it's all about the effectiveness of how you deploy the resources, and back to that conversation about, and if you don't have the right resources, go get them. And that often requires you to make hard choices about who you've got on your bench in order to close the gap. And that's it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time on social media, as you know. So I don't really know what anyone else is saying about anything else. But largely that's the job. So...
So question, it's not a trick question. Would you rather stand still or move rapidly in the wrong direction?
Oh, wow. See, this is the overthinking bit's going to come in now. I remember my chairman said...
It is a trick question, actually. I know the answer.
Is it a trick question? I don't know. When my chairman sort of quasi-interviewed me, apparently I was interviewing him, but I think he was interviewing me. He asked me, are you someone that, you know, counts down or counts up? Do you set the timer on 20 so it counts back on your gym session, or do you set the timer to go so that you can see yourself grow towards 20? And I was like... I said, well, I set it at 20 and it counts back. And he's like, oh, I don't know if I can work with someone like you. And I was like, oh, shit, wrong answer. And he said, you just need to sort of, you know, you need to just, the target is unlimited. You just need to see that you're progressing. And I was like, well, hang on, I want to re-answer that question because you're asking me a question and I'm thinking about my Peloton. And my Peloton counts down. I mean, all my gym equipment counts down. So...
And also, time is not finite. So sometimes you have to box in the time to do something.
I think my honest answer, I don't know if it is a trick question or not, would be if you genuinely don't have a clue what direction to go in, you should try and stand still. And what I would say is, I think there's a really big difference between standing still in a high quality way and standing still in a low quality way. So, it's back to when people are very stressed and I suggest that they just stop. Their version of just stop is sitting and catching up with social media. They're doing loads of stuff on their phone. They're phoning all their friends and family. They're letting everyone put all their other problems on them. And it's just, that is not what I would call a high quality stop. A high quality stop is silence. It's reflection. It's walking. It's pause. It's breathe. And, but you do have to time box that. Otherwise, you're just off the reservation having a kind of, that you can meditate for too long. And then there's a point at which just moving, I've got one more caveat for that though. If you just move in one direction in a dogmatic way, you are going to get where you're trying to go to. And the one thing about not knowing where you're trying to go and then dogmatically moving in a direction is you are certainly going to end up in the wrong place. So you need to start moving, back to that 5-second rule, start moving, but be going, am I going in the right place? What have I learned with that one step that tells me, is this the right direction? And then be prepared to U-turn. I think if I was to ask anyone in my company now, what's the thing that frustrates them the most about me? I think they might say she's got a propensity to change her mind. Which, oh gosh, that doesn't sound good from a leadership point of view, does it? And sometimes I think I'd split that in half and I'd go, well, half of that's due to my little spinning around thing. It's on my development plan. I'm working on it. Sorry. And then the other half of it is that's my move, test, shift. And you just want everything to go perfectly all the time and be able to do your project plan and it all just get executed like that. And it's like, I'm sorry, life isn't like that. We need to sometimes fail really quickly and then learn from it and shift, pivot. And actually, the more complicated life gets, the more you have to pivot. And so that's just uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I would say, in answer to the question, if I really, really, really don't know where I'm going, I would stand still, but I'd try and do that in a really high quality way. I'd time box it so it wasn't for very long. And if I still didn't know what I was doing, I'd just start moving. But I'd be prepared to change my mind as soon as I had more information.
Okay, so everything you said is amazing. And I think you answered it, but added an extra thing in there. So I didn't say that you didn't know where you were going, which is why every single one of your answers makes sense. So from a personal perspective, 100%, if you don't know where you're going and you've got no vision, then it makes sense to kind of stagnate, do some thinking, check your values.
Oh, interesting choice of words, stagnate. See, I'm feeling all this personal growth from standing still. I'm standing still and growing, you're like stagnating.
Because I think when you don't know where you want to go, for me, that whole time when you are literally stuck, you don't know where you want to go, I feel like that is stagnation. But from a business perspective, if you have a vision and you know where you want to go, but you don't, the multiple routes to get there, then I would align with what you said around not standing still, but just moving forward in one direction and looking for that, disproving data to say, am I going the right direction or am I not going the right direction? So taking that in and then moving alternatively. So I don't think there's anything wrong in changing your mind. Yeah. But stagnate. I don't like. I think that's a me thing.
When we do our reverse interview, I'm getting stuck into that word. Do you know what?
I'm too boring to interview. You can't interview me.
We said about the data points thing and instincts. Yeah. And by the way, I agree with you. Instinct is all about lots and lots of data points, and I think instinct has to be accompanied by a willingness to change direction. Instinct plus dogmaticness, I think, is quite dangerous because you can't explain to anyone else why you're doing what you're doing. At least if it's instinctive and you're prepared to change your mind, you can go, I don't really know where we're going. All I can tell you is my gut says it's this way. And it still leaves the door open for someone to go, I got all this data that says it's the wrong way. I mean, I remember launching this massive software system back when I was like 22, 23, and I had everyone in a room, and I went round everyone in the room, and I thought I'd create an environment for people to say if they thought there was something wrong. And I was like, should we put this platform live? Is there any reason why, you wouldn't put this platform live? And I obviously didn't create an environment where people felt they could speak up, because
people were like, should we put this platform live? Should we put this platform live?
Well, you worked with me then, so I mean, I can only imagine what that looked like. But I remember this session because, of course, it took 3 days back then, when it took at least 3 days to make any small change in tech, 24/7 working and sleeping under desks. And then exhaustedly, I sent out this email to just everyone in BT, including the group chief exec at the time, saying, hurrah, we're live, aren't we great? Aren't I great? And then went home, went to bed, and it was back in the day when notifications were not that clever. Your phone was either off or on. And I turned it off. I slept solidly for like 14 hours. I turned my phone on and it was like beep, 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 like the old text message. And then like voicemail after voicemail, where the hell are you? I mean, pretty much every call centre in BT around the world had crashed. And had been crashed for a while, and I was asleep through most of it. And I mean, if that's not a fireable offence, I'm not sure what it is. But I did the whole drones up afterwards, and people were like, yeah, well, we kind of figured that would happen. I was like, why didn't you say anything? And to this day, I still don't really know why they didn't say anything, but I absolutely have to accept there just wasn't the environment for people to feel the psychological safety to speak up. And also, people think like it's like a mechanic looking at you when you're getting your car done, and they sort of speak in gobbledygook and just sort of say, well, that fits with that, and that's why that, and then they move on, and it's like I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't work, and I think sometimes as specialists, we think people understand us. I mean, we all think we're better communicators than we are, and so I mean, I know that in relationships, it's like we had that conversation, didn't we? About that thing, didn't we? We were not even in the same room, let alone the same conversation. Anyway, I've gone off on one.
No, it's brilliant. Okay, so what trait do you have that doesn't serve you daily that you're desperately trying to change on your personal development plan?
Oh, shit. It's long. My personal development plan is long. It varies between this spinning around washing machine decision-making thing when it relates to people. This sort of potential meets reality, meets me taking accountability for them, mash-up thing we talked about. It varies between that one and just a bulk standard inability to listen. I mean, I have a classic... it's shameful, actually. My inability to listen is shameful at times. And yet... other times I can really listen. So why I can't always deploy it? Well, I don't know. I should ask you. You know me personally. So I think I can listen. I just don't sometimes. And so it's a personal choice not to. And so I'm like, why am I choosing not to in the workplace? And I think it's an efficiency thing. And definitely I'm worse when I'm stressed. So back to this whole cycle of, actually, what's the job of a CEO? Vision, identify the gap, deploy the resources to close the gap, or get the resources if you don't have them. That circle. And then the rest of it is all your personal health, your mindset, your stress levels. Because when you bring your best self to work, you just cause everyone else so much less grief. And when I bring my worst self to work, it's just, I can see it causes all sorts of ramifications. So... at the moment, I'd say I'm somewhere on the lower end of best self to work. So what happens is I just come in and give everyone the answer to all the questions. It's very efficient. And, please don't take this as arrogance, but it's probably right a lot of the time. So it also works for short periods of time. The problem is it creates a culture of just asking me what the answer is. You start doing that for an organisation of any scale, that becomes problematic. God, this is like a coaching session now. I'm just all my woes. But it is efficient. And then I think it has the second consequence of people don't feel listened to. I mean, there is nothing, I know this from my personal relationships, from, romantic relationships, there is nothing more painful than not feeling listened to. Nothing.
Yeah.
So when I don't deploy listening, which is fairly blooming often, actually, I think it has those two unwanted consequences. So when I stop ruminating on my washing machine problem and I deal with that, and I think I'm making good progress on that, actually, on my self-development trajectory. So soon I'm going to park that one as good enough. I definitely have an 80-20 rule to my personal development. It's good enough. That'll work. Let's move on to the next one. The next one is going to be listening. And it's with great dread, but I've got to tackle it. So next up.
I think that's really interesting because a textbook, what does a CEO do? And funny enough, I was going to say to you a minute ago, fill in the blank. You are a shit CEO if, or you cannot be a good CEO if you don't have, or this. And I would have sworn that you would have said listen.
No, actually.
Because in the textbooks, it's all about a leader listens, and then deploys, takes in the data from the room. Obviously, you've got to be decisive and make the decision, but it's all about... So I find it really interesting.
Yeah, how have I got this far by not listening and then being really indecisive? I get that.
It means that you're always bloody right.
So I think that paradigm is totally wrong now. Actually, back to the if I said to you, you've got £50, it needs to be £500 for you to be able to retire. And here's 3 CEOs. This one always gets £500 by hook or by crook. And this one, and on the other end of the scale, they listen a lot and they take in the room and they which one are you giving your £50 to? I mean, Jesus, we're all giving it to the one that gets 500 quid, right? So I think the bit we mustn't lose sight of as CEOs is our responsibility is to deliver the business strategy. Now, if we can't do that in a way that doesn't create so many casualties or doesn't take too many goes or doesn't, then, it's the board's job to fire the CEO, get a new one. But that doesn't change the CEO's job. The CEO's job is to deliver the strategy and, more importantly, to envisage, to vision, to imagine a strategy that is big enough. So if you can't do those two things, then you don't get a right to work on the rest. And hence I think the real question you're asking is what's the difference between a CEO's job and then a CEO who does the job well? So the CEO's job is vision big enough, identify the gap, close the gap with the resources you've got or get other resources. And one that does it well is one that is able to really develop their resources so they don't have to bring in so much, require so much. They're able to organically grow. They're able to grow their people. They're able to grow their bottom line. They're able to grow their brand. They're able to grow themselves. They're able to do, and a lot of that is through listening effectively and building strong teams. And so it's back to the how. But the what is the what. Don't confuse the what and the how. There are no CEOs out there getting paid to listen.
I love it.
They're there to make some money usually.
All right, so very quickly, because I've asked this question 3 times now and somehow we keep not answering it. Walk me through your work week. Really quickly, snapshot. Just Monday to Friday. What time do you wake up? What do you do?
Here we go. So I'll start with Sunday night, actually, because Sunday night, I usually, by evening time, I'm starting to flick around with my to-do list. So I use just Apple reminders, but I have a really well-organised to-do list. And I always say, the sign of an efficient person is not getting your stuff done, it's kicking out all the stuff that's not important. So Sunday night, I'm like, did I say I was going to do that tomorrow? I don't know why I said that. We can make an apology for that thing, but that is suddenly not the most important thing on the list. So I get really ruthless about the important stuff I've got to get done, and then I pretty much organise it through each day of the week, knowing full well that I'll now do that every night until the next weekend, and so stuff will move around again. But so starting from Sunday night, I do the big organise for the week ahead, and I really think what actually really needs to get done this week, not what's in my diary, but what do I need to do to materially shift the dial? And I get really super focused on that. And then it usually gets me
Is that goal-based?
Yeah. gets me into a deep conversation of, is that goal big enough? And is that interim goal actually going to get me there, or am I lying to myself about that? And so I organise my to-do list, and some of that might trigger that bigger thought process. If it does, I'm getting better at kind of boxing that off on Sunday and not spending my whole evening thinking about it, but I might add to the to-do list that tomorrow, and clear the time, tomorrow I need to do something about thinking about this thing. If I've uncovered there's a bigger problem here with how we might be executing closing the gap, I'll create the space to think about it. So Sunday night I organise my week. Sunday night I remind myself to exercise more, eat healthier foods. and actually I'm usually pretty good at it, but I have that little pep talk. And so Monday morning I'll get up, I'll use the gym, I'll have a juice, I'll probably make an extra one and take it into work if that's my office. I don't generally eat until about midday. And I totally don't believe all this nonsense about you need to have a healthy breakfast. I think it's really bad for blood sugar levels, but that's another conversation. And then I now execute a diary. You know, if there's a lot of stuff flying around, I can be very busy, but I genuinely try not to be back to back. If I'm working from home, I always have a big dog walk in the middle of the day. If I'm busy, I spend that dog walk phoning people. If I need to think, I spend it thinking. And so it's flexible time. If I'm in the office, I tend to do all my one-to-ones walking around the park. So I get some exercise in. And it's so much easier to have a direct conversation with someone when you're both pointing forwards. There's nothing more awkward. Like, why have we set this up to sit? Like, you used to have the best conversations with your partner when you're in the car. It's because you're both facing that way and you can finally be honest with each other.
No eye contact.
Yeah. And so do
you
the
can be
same
shifty
thing.
and you can lie because your eyes don't go up to the left.
No, I'm not
right.
suggesting lying. But I think the both sort of walking, and you can just have such a rich, more honest dialogue with someone. It's so weird sitting in an office room facing each other. Even in a coffee shop can be a bit awkward. So I like to do a lot of them walking, and it just gets you moving as well, and it's more creative. So if I'm in the office doing one-to-ones, I'm walking in the park unless it's raining, or I'm doing workshops, and that's usually me up on a whiteboard about something or another. And I try and have a lot of space. Most of my week is spent talking to customers, potential acquisitions, our investors. But basically, I guess the summary of all that is I'll always try and juice. I'll always try and exercise. I always create space to think. I'm always asking myself, what's missing this week? Is it that I haven't communicated enough, so I'm going to just randomly start rephoning people and reconnecting with people? Is it that I haven't thought enough, right, I'm going to create the time to really think about our future and our vision for the future? Is it that I'm not physically reading or doing enough stuff? I'll be like, oh gosh, yeah, hang on, I haven't read a bunch of this industry stuff. I'm going to carve out some time for reading and catch myself up. I'm very honest with myself about what needs to get done, and then very good at creating the space to do it and shutting out the stuff that is lower priority. I make more apologies. I call Monday my apology day. Monday is I know you said you were getting 30 minutes with me, but you're not. I'm so sorry.
You missed out a very important... Did I listen this week?
Oh shit, no.
Add that to your...
Yeah, actually, that's not even on my list. I really need to work on that development plan. I'm telling you, in a year you'll interview me again, and I fingers crossed. It'll be about, it'll be the listening one.
You know, I'm obsessed with food, as you are.
Yes.
So I need to go back to your statement about not having a healthy breakfast. I'm assuming you're talking about a breakfast that's filled with lots of fructose that crashes your blood sugar at midday. So
I have a thing. It's only because I had a whole raft of sort of annoying through to serious digestion related issues. I am a fan of resting your digestive system for a period, and it's really hard to do in the evening. Who doesn't want to have a snack in front of bad TV? So my rest of my digestion is pretty much from when I go to bed, or the hour or so before I go to bed, through to midday. And that morning rest period there's some science behind how many hours it takes for your digestion to clear, and is important. Now, however you do that, whether you stop eating at 6 o'clock in the evening like some people do and then they get up and have a breakfast, I don't mind, but I think you do need to give your digestion a rest, and I think it's harder to do in the evening, hence I've become anti-breakfast. Having said that, though, I juice, so I'm flooding myself with vitamins and minerals from freshly, cold pressed juice every morning that I make myself. So I'm intaking nutritional value. I'm just doing it in a way that's very, very, very low stress on the digestive system. And what I have found as a consequence of doing that is you don't get all the sugar spikes, you don't get the same 3 o'clock slump. And it's just, I found it to be transformational for my day. What I've also found is the minute I start eating solid food, I get hungry. And if I don't bother, I mean, you know, I've juiced for 30 days before. So as long as your juices consist of lots of vegetables and proteins in some form or another, they might be soluble proteins, but it's just something, soluble fibre rather, but and you can put blend protein in like avocados or as long as it's balanced, really balanced, you can juice indefinitely. It's a complete lie that you can't. You do not need to eat solid food. And we overeat, like we just consume so much stuff that stresses our digestive system. So my anti-breakfast thing has been, for me personally, and sorry, I don't want to tell anyone else how to live their life. For me personally, it has been rest my digestive system, use it as a chance to flood my body with vitamins and minerals by juice. And I have found in so pursuing that if I eat solid food, I get hungry really quickly. So then I'm having 11 Z's. I have breakfast followed by 11 Z's, followed by lunch. I used to call it my 2 lunches. I'd have one at 11 and one at 2 o'clock. And I just eat constantly. And because I'm quite a stress eater as well. So I've just found it useful to delay the start of that. And I have more energy from waiting till I'm genuinely hungry to eat rather than like shoving something in, you know, as soon as I wake up whilst I'm rushing around trying to get out the door to work. I think everybody's bodies are different though. So this whole one size thing, definitely people's digestive systems seem to be different. People's tolerances for things seems to be different. So I do not want to get on my soapbox about what is right or wrong. All I can tell you is what's worked for me. You know, that's it.
Well, I think you're right, everybody is different, but you know, the studies do say 12 to 16 hours of intermittent fasting at least 3 times a week. Live longer, your microbiome gets sorted out, all that good stuff. But it's funny because I know some people who wear the same thing pretty much every day because it's just stress-free. I'm the same with my food. It's taken me about 3 years to figure out what the hell I need to eat and when for me not to crash, because I'm a huge crasher. So I have my proper oats on the stove with berries and banana. For some reason the berries don't seem to give me a crash and the banana keeps me alive till like lunchtime. And then I have kind of salmon salad, very light, and then evening. But the fact is I just don't think about my food anymore until I go out and I'm ordering out and that kind of thing. But it saves time, and 2, when you don't know your body, and I think it's really important for anybody, whether you're a leader or not a leader, you're just trying to make progress and be successful in your day, you know, especially as women with hormones on top of that, which add to the fatigue. If you're now adding that by eating the wrong things at the wrong time, you're fucked.
Yeah, I think that is, I completely agree with that. And actually, if I was going to eat anything in the morning, it would be porridge. So I think there's, you know, I kind of get that system completely. And but it is whatever works for you. I think the only bit I would say is, in general, we just are consuming too regularly. That little bit and often is the worst advice ever put out there, I think, because your body is never got a break. I mean, I think if you go far enough back, wasn't it that people used to eat once a day? You know, certainly they'd be hunting all day, and then, you know, and then you're eating what you've killed, but you're not like, I mean, we're constantly snacking as a society. I can't, anyway, for me personally, like I said, I'm not going to rant on about what people should or shouldn't do, but for me personally, the biggest dietary change I've made that's been helpful is ceasing to suffer from malnutrition by getting enough fruit and vegetables, and the only way I've been able to eat enough is through juicing. Just our food sources of poor quality these days. And then it's really helped me to not eat until lunchtime. That rest after I wake up has been super. I mean, I fill it with black coffee, to be fair. So.
Oh, I love my coffee.
I love my coffee.
But you can get me talking about food all day. I think the advice that I'd give anyone listening is don't listen to the fads and go straight to the scientific proof.
But also
because, like you said, this whole Say that again?
Test and learn. Like, your body is your body. It's no one else's body. Like, test and learn. If it doesn't work for you, try something else. You are meant to feel non-bloated, light, energized. If you're not feeling that, then change and keep trying until you do. You know, but all this I've got the solution for you thing, it's like, you know, just try, find your own way. That's my mission for everything in life. Find your own way. Experts.
Or find the data, which is what I do. That's true. Just because ES Magazine says the new fad is this, no, go and find a podcast where they've actually done the studies, and this is all they talk about all day long, because those studies take 6 months to a year to even
that's true
hit the news, and only when it benefits some conglomerate who wants to make money.
I was going to say that's my problem with the science.
Like goji berries.
Is the science is all sponsored. There's this great book about sugar, White and Deadly or something like that. Sorry, I wish I could remember it. It was a real eye-opener of a book for me, because it was basically written by the scientist who had done all the studies about, you know, basically refined sugar causes all sorts of cancer and inflammation and health problems. And he was just sort of shut down by all these big companies. And it's basically, the book describes the science as really clearly as he can, and it's quite compelling, but also a bit about his personal journey to basically having the full weight of the machine just shut him out of the scientific community.
Whistleblower.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow. And certainly if that research had come to the fore then, we wouldn't be in a society that has as much refined sugar in our food system. Full stop, we wouldn't. So, I mean, it changed my relationship with sugar reading that book. So, I mean, this is quickly becoming the diet interview.
I know. I can keep talking, so let's move on. All right. Okay. So, you've given so much advice already. I was going to ask for advice around leaders, but I guess go for it. Give me one sentence, the best piece of advice you would give to an upcoming leader. Know yourself.
It's so well, two pieces of advice, if I may. So I know you said only one. One, do you really want to lead? Do you actually know what that is? It's back to that preconception. You know, above all else, are you prepared to hit the goal? And the toll that will take on you, your family, have you really thought it through? It's that question of, why do you want to lead? Most people either can't answer the question, or they think it's about more money and a better job title, or they think that they have to because that's just what you do. I mean, the shocking amount of little thought goes into people moving into leadership positions. Really blows my mind. So do you want to do it, you know? And then the trouble with leaders, even if all of the above is well thought through and you really want to do it, leaders who don't know themselves are very dangerous. So, you know, you kind of have to take that. If you took the whole population and say, look, you know, what proportion of it is full of very well-rounded people who know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, they've made peace with it, they've made peace with their family, they've made peace with their past, they've made peace with their appearance, they've made peace with their disability, they've made peace with everything, they know themselves. There is a direct correlation between the ability to lead others and the extent to which you know yourself. And I think the most dangerous leaders are those that just have no idea who they are. You know,
is that because they're so much more easily influenced by other people around them, so they're not thinking for themselves, or just because?
Hey, look, it's full of all sorts of people. It's those that have got self-esteem issues. It's full of narcissists. It's full of just a whole bunch of people who should not be in charge of people, but for some reason they strive for leadership for reasons of plugging a personal hole in their psyche. And that's why I say those leaders are dangerous. They do real damage to people and to companies and to value. And remember, I don't think it's bad to talk about companies making money like it's a dirty capitalist word. That's where our savings interest is coming from. It's where our pensions are coming from. It's where, ultimately the state's welfare budget comes from. So if we want society to keep going around, then companies have to be good companies. And bad leaders do a lot of damage. So I think knowing that you want to lead, you really want it, with all the downsides, because I honestly, it's not great. Like here's the big expo. Leadership really sucks. Like, it's lonely. It's lonely. It's really hard. The hours are long. I mean, if you did the genuine job advert for leadership, right? I warts and all, I'm not sure anyone would apply. So, if you ask me why I lead, I tell you, it's back to that potential thing. When I look at my friend and I'm like, you should be the cabin crew leader because you'd just be so much better at it. But in my mind, I'm going, why are you stopping people from getting access to you? Why are you making them suffer with a worse service? You have an obligation to put yourself out there and provide a better service. I mean, at this point, he's going to be giving me two fingers and telling me to get lost because he's got a party to go to and a better work-life balance than me. And that's why I love him so much, because he knows himself so well. I feel I have an obligation to lead, not because I want to all the time, not because it's painful, because it is, and it's lonely, and it's hard, and it's brutal. But it's a calling. I feel like I have an obligation to lead. I say this with as little arrogance as I can find. I feel that I know how to lead, and therefore I have to put it out there. And I know it's much more like real leadership. I think is much more like an Olympic run, particularly if you work in a private equity setting. This analogy works brilliantly. If you were with someone who, whether friend, lover, husband, wife, and, they were in the 3-year prep for the Olympics. It's the one-time shot. They are training hard. They're resting in the right way. They're eating in the right way. And you, the partner's like, I'm not sure you're spending enough time with me. I mean, we never go out for nice dinners anymore. I always have to drink wine alone. I think you need to be a bit more balanced about it. I mean, all you do is run. I mean, let's take up some other sports. I mean, you'll be like, they're training for the Olympics. I mean, get on the bus, get off the bus, but you can't do the Olympics halfway. Like, what are you even talking about? Now, maybe that's therefore not the right relationship for you to be in, because you don't want to. That's perfectly cool. Know yourself, know that you don't want to be in that situation. But to ask them to go half mode, there is no such thing as training for the Olympics in half mode. I mean, you just wouldn't get there. Leadership is like that, I think. And particularly if you are in a private equity situation, it has an end date. So it's like the Olympics. There is an event, and you are striving your very, very best to win the race. And if you're not prepared to do that, then certainly in a private equity setting, you've got no right to lead a private equity company, for sure. So when people talk to me about work-life balance and things like that, I go, and actually, I should say I have great work-life balance, but I plan it in like an Olympic athlete plans in rest periods, because it's important for health. It's really important for the people I love. But it's not for some generic reason of work-life balance, like working is bad. It's because I need to rest, and I want to see my friend, or I want to. But the harsh reality is, if I couldn't rest because the job needed me to do it, just because I didn't want to get up at 6 a.m. and go for that run, even though I'm training for the Olympics to be a runner, you got to get up at 6 a.m. and go for a run. So there is something, and I might be alone. I'm going to get a barrage now of online social media stuff about work-life balance. Bring it on. I hear you. Back to, I'm not telling anyone how to live or lead. I would never presume that. But
you're giving a positive message.
For me,
there's nothing wrong in what you're saying.
For me, I just think people need to ask themselves, are they prepared to do it? Because I don't think we have enough of a serious dialogue going on about what the job of leadership is. And the job of leadership is all in. And if you're not all in, I think you're at times doing a disservice to your investors and you're doing a disservice to the people who work for you and trust you. That's the thing. And I don't blame anyone for a second who doesn't want to do that job. I don't blame them for a second.
I think what's really interesting, though, is that whilst we're talking about leadership at a C-suite or directorship level, but there can be leaders at all parts of the organization. Even if you're a program manager, a program director, you getting your team to deliver something in 12 weeks requires some leadership, persuasion, motivation, getting them to understand the vision and to execute. So everything that you've said kind of resonates even at, the lower levels of leadership. So considering everything that's required of you, have you ever thought, I can't do this, or had imposter syndrome? Have you ever had, even for a second, have you thought, oh, crap, I can't do this?
Do you know what? In my, I think it's a very insidious thing to let doubt in. So no would be the short answer, because I wouldn't let that seed take hold. But I have had imposter syndrome once, and I have to be careful because it's fairly recent and it's nothing to do with my day job. So, so how to answer the question in a way that doesn't, but I had a moment of realising, I think I realised I was in a setting because I was a woman, and a youngish woman at that, back to our age being relative discussion. And I was having this conversation with a colleague who, it's like, God, no, you're in this position because you're great. And I was like, yeah, genuinely, I'm not that arrogant. And I'm also really comfortable in my own skin. I'm okay with the knowledge that I might be here for those reasons. And I just intend to sort of make the most of it. It doesn't really matter how I got here. It matters what I do with it. That's always been my attitude. But but then I found myself in a sort of further escalated situation where I thought, I really think there are better people than me to do this job. Like, really? The logical side of my brain's going, I genuinely think you could have done better. And I'm like, what's the game going on here that keeps putting my name in the frame? And then I did laugh when I had this conversation with a colleague and I was trying to read their body language, and I was thinking, do they mean what they're saying when they're genuinely trying to assure me it's because of capability? And I thought, yeah, I'm still not buying it. That's that. I have so little need to be congratulated or sort of stroked my ego-wise. I have just sort of seemed to have no capacity to need that. So my logical brain takes all the kind of load. So when someone's saying that, I'm passing it through the matrix again, going, yeah, it just doesn't add up. Yeah, the maths isn't there. And it's back to, I'm not sure that's right. Like, I'm not implying that is right at all, but it's just my way of seeing the world. And the reality is I could just think of lots of people who could do it better. So.
Do you really believe that, though? Do you really think that if you kind of put in the hours that you do and all the energy it takes and everything, and no one said thank you, you'd feel all right?
Yeah. I think I'm pathological on that spectrum. I said to literally, I'm going to give a little shout out to my chairman now, because he gets it between the eyes regularly by me. And I think the first time he really, he really had to experience this is he tried to say well done to me for something. And I think I gave him quite a full-on lecture, which roughly went like this. Look, you really don't need to say thank you to me. And he goes, no, it's fine. I really want to. You did a great job. I said, no, we need to have the conversation. Like, when you say thank you, the only thing that's going through my head is, who the hell are you to say thank you to me? Like, I'll tell me when I've done a good job. And I can tell you there's about 6 things I would have done better on that job. I've already logged them. They're in my learning plan, and I'm going to do differently next time. So I've had the self-development one-to-one with myself, and I know where I scored, and I've given myself a thank you. So thank you, you're too late.
This is why
He looked at me like this. I know. I mean, we laugh about it now, but I think that is probably unusual and probably unhealthy. Actually, I am quite pathologically on that side. But I would say I've learnt to have a much kinder conversation with myself. If the only person who I'm going to let say thank you to me, and the only person who I'm going to let give me any real feedback is me, you know, that feedback has to be really genuinely multi-sided. So I remind myself to genuinely say well done, and I have gotten better at that. So I do sometimes say well done. Sometimes I go, shit, that was so much better than we both planned. Me and my inner head.
Your alter ego.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this
me
to the
and
test.
the other me.
Over the next 6 months,
like,
I'm going to get you to do a whole host of shit for me, and I'm not going to say thank you once.
You're going to test it.
Let's see where our friendship is after that.
Actually, yeah, do you know, in a work setting now, but I can think of several ways in which you're still going to have to say thank you.
All right, perfect. Just a couple more questions until we get onto the fire round. So, what are you most proud of in your years on this earth?
Two things. Two things. One was some work I did to try and turn, long before, you know, we watched streaming TV services for, you know, as standard over our broadband line. I mean, heaven forbid bothering to install a Sky dish now unless you live in the never never. Long before that, I and a handful of people and I went on to sort of turn that into a reality and execute it, had a vision that you would watch and distribute content over broadband, and DVDs would be gone and skyboxes would be gone, and it was before that reality really started to take off, and I had this idea that your home broadband line would kind of be split into two, you know, the service that you got, and then we'd clear this passage for just all this content to get to you, and the content companies would pay us. And I remember being on stage going, you can't expect to use my network, Spectrum BT, you can't expect to use my network for free. Like right now you're paying the DVD company to kind of press some physical discs, and then you're boxing them up and you're putting a label on them and you're marketing them and you're sending them out. And then Blockbuster is creating these forms and renting them and sending that whole supply chain. You just want to dump that stuff on my network for free? I was like, you got to be kidding. And I remember standing up on stage and managing to get these sort of content people to go, oh, actually, when you put it like that, she's kind of got a point. And I was like, I'm going to charge you a tiny little amount to get off the back of everyone's broadband line, but I'll give you complete clear passage into everyone's home uninterrupted. And then Google lobbied the courts in America and brought in something called net neutrality, and it became illegal. And then the European law adopted it and it became illegal. And I'd spent a lot of BT's money on upgrading the network to be able to sort of carry content. And it was almost really bad. And then I was saved by Ian Livingston at the time, sort of vision to buy sports and ship sports over the network, and my boss at the time and me sort of came up with the idea, and the techie people that really brought it to life with very, very cool stuff in the network. We were all kind of saved by the fact that all of a sudden the kind of executive question was, but can the network handle it? We were like, yes.
We'll soon find out.
Yeah, ta-da. And but I was really proud of how cool that whole, it sounds idiotic now as a business model, but back then it sounded and felt really revolutionary, and I loved doing something that was really counter the status quo, and the feeling of being on stage and convincing a bunch of people that it was, they're seeing the world the one way around and watching their minds shift. I loved that. And then the second time is obviously the more recent time of, you know, the creation of Correla. You know, I wake up one morning, some mornings, and go, you know, I actually created a company, and then actually sold a company and sold it to a really cool investment house that I still like 18 months later. And we're doing really great things. And, you know, I don't think anyone would have said that was possible. I think if you queued anyone up in the energy sector and said, so, you know, yeah, some random lady over here is just going to kind of do this, and then that'll happen, and then that'll happen. And, you know, it'll all be done in sort of 18 months. Everyone would go, no way. So I think you can read into that. I back to that very high bar I set myself. I have to be able to look at it and go, that was genuinely, uniquely quite cool by anyone's standards, not just by mine, but just by the broader concept of something that was cool and innovative. So the fact that at this point in my life I've only really got two probably tells you about the standard I set, how high it is. So I've got to work hard to kind of to get more in that shopping bag.
They're both phenomenal. What about on a personal front?
That's a good question too. So I had the benefit of doing quite a lot of mountaineering when I was younger, and I guess quite a lot of people have been to Everest Base Camp, but I got up past there, not all the way to the top. Unfortunately, I was backpacking at the time, and the license, I think, to go all the way to the top was like £60,000 or something ridiculous. I'm guessing that was for the expedition support, but I managed to get a few camps halfway up beyond base camp, and it was the most terrifying experience of my life. And I was out training for 30 days beforehand, and I climbed a few mountains next to it, one being Island Peak, and I almost got ripped off it in a snowstorm. And pretty much everyone in my expedition group was sort of strapped to a donkey and sent down, going insane with altitude sickness and fatigue. And I mean, it's a recipe for, there's a reason why people do this massive amounts of training before they try. We didn't. We were just rocked up with sort of sandals and backpacks and said, we're going to have a go. And but it was a hell of an experience. Like, in the end, it was only me and a tennis coach who described his life as basically coaching married women every day. And I think, plus a bit, as far as I could tell from his stories. And
extras.
And they were like proper mountaineers, the kind that hang on with their fingertips off the edge of mountains. They didn't make it. The altitude just took them out. So
that speaks to your resilience.
It was mental. And I still was just really annoyed because I didn't really experience it as much as I would have liked to at the end, because I was out from my tree with altitude sickness as well. I could barely see where I was going. So, but I was really proud of that. And I'm really proud of, I've quit my job twice now and gone around the world. Well, in fairness, once was before I started working properly, so that doesn't really count. And so I quit my job once to do this, I guess. But I've been around the world twice, backpacking for a year on my own, and the personal growth that comes from that is phenomenal. I've got so many stories, particularly in India, and I've worked with a lot of Indian offshore companies that I've partnered with over the years. And when I tell them the stories of my time in India, I mean, literally CEOs of big Indian SIs going, like, the shame you did, like, we should have had a driver, you should have been put in that situation. I was like, no, I did it myself. I wandered off and I fell in a ditch and I was on the top of a bus and I disappeared off and accidentally went to someone's wedding. And the shock that I might have been exposed to kind of anything too gritty inside their country, they always take it very personally. I was like, no, it was personal choice. It was great. You should try it.
Do you know what? You have lived so well, but through so many challenges. And this interview is literally going to last forever, but I'm happy for it to last forever. I have a couple of personal questions for you that I think people probably want to know. So you chose not to have kids. Do you ever regret that decision? Do you think you would be as dope a CEO as you are now if you had kids of your own? I know you're a stepmother. So
I the older I get, the more I think about it, but more almost like I think I should have regrets, and I keep sort of sense checking are they there? Why are they not there? What's wrong with me? Why don't I have some sort of pang towards, childbirth? I think you can be a mother in lots of different ways, but childbirth. But I never have done. And for me, I actually think for me it's slightly unnatural, as in I think I probably would have wanted to be a mother just by how much I love kids. But I had a very difficult, not early upbringing, well, I don't think so anyway, I can't remember, but I had a very difficult middle sort of teens period of very difficult time. And I think when I looked back on it, and I did a lot of looking back on it and a lot of psychotherapy through my 20s, and the thing that always bothered me the most is my parents were decent people from a sort of middle income family, and they, I think, were trying their best, and it went catastrophically wrong. And I'm thinking, how is it, especially I'm a product of them, with the best one in the world, I'm going to somehow bring up my children the same way they brought up me, and that they brought up me with the best intent, and it still didn't all work out. And I mean, it really didn't work out. It went boom with such far-reaching consequences for me as a person. It took me decades to recover. And so I always believed that the odds of doing a good job, it's back to that scarily logical brain I've got, the odds of doing a good job of a parent, of not producing messed up kids that need to go into therapy, the odds of that happening were so low that I had a responsibility to just stop that shit from happening. Just stop the wagon. Like, everybody get off. We've got to stop producing generations of messed up kids. And I just didn't feel like I had a remotely rounded enough start in life to not bring all that nonsense into my version of parenting. And so for me, it's always been a really conscious decision, almost like a social obligation to not do it. And I again, back to never telling anyone else how to live their life. I think a lot of people need to ask themselves back to, do you really want to lead? The other thing is, do you really want to be a parent? And are you equipped to do it? You know, have you put enough of your own demons to bed before you accidentally pass them all on to the next generation?
So true.
And so for me, I never felt like I would do a good enough job. And so it was a conscious decision. And once I've made a decision, I don't generally look backwards. So it's back to, do you regret? I don't have regrets, because I don't generally spend any time looking in the past. But then I had and still have the experience of being a stepmom. And from, 7, 8 and 9, with the ages of my stepkids when I became stepmom. And I hate the word stepmom, because they've got a mum and a dad. I'm sort of I'm sort of sponsor friend, parent when I need to be, sort of constant in their lives. And they're just epic. And I've loved being able to share things with them. It's the most bizarre stuff that I've loved. So, because I've got no problem talking about things that need to be talked about, I've ended up with the most random jobs in the triumvirate of a mum, a dad and me. Like, I'm the one that had the water out and the tampon, kind of trying to explain to my stepdaughter what this thing does. And then I remember my husband coming in and looking at this drawing on the floor with the 3 kids behind me, and there's fallopian tubes and penises, and I'm like drawing out all this anatomy with the water next to it, with the tampon in it, and then he comes past a little bit later, and I've got a banana and a condom.
Oh my days.
And I'm completely deadpan. It didn't bother me at all. Like, I could have talked about that for hours. And because there wasn't an emotional awkwardness at all in the conversation, I remember it was so amazing, because the kids were like, really? And so then what happens with that? And where's that go? And so they were really unemotionally awkward too. And we just had this amazing dialogue. And so the ability to have experiences like that have been an absolute blessing. And so I think, you know, I've managed to sneak off with like the best bits of parenthood without without the bits that I was most scared about. Having said that, you know, turns out all relationships are not perfect, and even in a step parenting situation, you still have the capacity to pass on some of your baggage. And so I hope I haven't passed on too much, but I suspect I have passed on a bit. I think we all do. And but I think it's been outweighed by passing on some good stuff. So,
well, I think
you know, we'll find out.
And they're lucky to have you. And when you've got time, can you kind of do that diagramming for me as well? 'Cause I'm confused about a few things till now. I still don't know where things go. And I don't know where my fallopian tubes are. No, I'm joking, I do. All right, are you ready for a quick fire round?
Oh gosh, yeah, go on then.
Amazing. Okay. What 3 words describe you?
Curious, tough. I think I'm going to go with empathic, I think it's time I started accepting the fact I might actually be able to put myself in other people's shoes. There you go.
I've already asked this, but make it a quick answer. What achievement or thing are you most proud of?
Are you saying I spend a long time answering my questions?
No, it's a quick fire round.
The creation of Correla, without a doubt.
Is it more important to be liked or respected?
Respected, for me.
If you could be remembered for one thing,
I
what would it
refuse
be?
to accept that you can't be both, by the way.
Okay.
So that's my caveat to that question. You can be respected and liked. You absolutely
but you can only pick one, though. This is a
that's why
decision thing, Sian. It's a decision thing.
I played, but, you know, I still don't accept the question, but yeah, carry on.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Aspiring for big. I don't want to go to my grave having left anything on the table. There you go.
Do you invest? If so, in what?
Oh, financially, do I invest? Do you mean, or
Take it any way you like.
so I invest. I like property, I must say. And the reason I picked that is if I've ever got any spare cash, I either put it into doing up my home, or I would buy another home and rent it out. And we have this in common, I know, which is just the concept of building up bricks and mortar and making it look different and function differently. It is a physical investment, so if you make those decisions smartly, it should appreciate. But it's also a time investment, and it's an energy investment that pays back. So I always think the definition, it's a gift. If you don't get a payback, it's a gift. An investment, by definition, is something that pays you back afterwards. So the great thing about investing in your home is you get this payback of kind of feng shui style, like coolness every time you change something and get it just right. And it's you that's got me on that bandwagon. A home used to be a functional place where I slept, and it was all about my work. Now I'm like, my home is my space where like I exercise and I live and I eat and I work and I socialise and I enjoy and I love and all of these things. And it's a very special thing to invest in. So I'm going to say property in its broader investment sense, and then your home in a more, you know, personal or rounded sense of investment. There you go.
That's amazing. What one thing do you want to do before you leave this earth?
I'm going to husky to the South Pole for sure.
And I know you will.
Yeah, that's up there. That's next on the list. It's brutal, I'm told, but I just got to do it.
Say that again?
It's brutal, I'm told, but I've got to do
it. You'll do it. Don't take me with you. This is one trip I'm not going
No
on.
one ever wants to do any of my stuff with me.
I'll stroke the husky.
Yeah.
What's the single most important piece of advice you would give to another woman?
Know yourself. It's exactly the same answer for you can't lead if you don't know yourself, and you can't love if you don't know yourself. God knows the pain of failed loves from not knowing oneself. Let us hope that we all learn and love better next time. Yeah, know yourself. Invest so much time in thinking about you and who you are and what you stand for, and just and give yourself a lot of self-love and breaks and peace and compliments. Yeah, actually, that's an even better bit of advice. The other person, the person that sits here on the side of your head all the time, because they are there, the other you, the one that's having a constant conversation with you all the time, and if you haven't met them, pause for 1 minute, because they're there all the time in your ear. You can control that narrative. That person is either nice to you or mean to you, and you need to get control of that person. The way you do it is you drown them out with a louder voice. If that person is not nice to you already, then you need to start drowning them out. Over talking them. Maybe this is why I don't listen. I've over talked that voice until now. All it does is go, yeah, Sian, you're great, you're amazing, you can do it, all the time. And if that voice is going, yeah, I don't think you're very good at that, you're going to fail, don't even try. I mean, you have no chance to aspire or succeed in anything you do if you don't get control of that voice. And you can by faking it till you make it, over talk it, like literally drown out the negative dialogue, and eventually the voice changes. I can tell you from personal experience. You can just over talk it until you've got control of it, and the narrative is broadly positive. And that is so important to being able to achieve anything. You can't do jack if you've got someone on your back giving you a load of crap. It's so there's a rap in there somewhere.
That's so important, that kind of disempowering talk. And we're talking about the 5 4 3 2 1 and the pattern interruption. Just replacing that negative talk with something empowering as soon as it gets into your mind. It's something, you know me well, so you know that I struggle with it all the time, but I think we all do. Male, female, whatever. I'm sure true. Chloe has a bit of a negative.
No, she's just saving that for when she's thinking about you.
That's just what I'm giving it. That's what I'm just giving her daggers. She's just feeling it and then feeling crap. Anyway, what does freedom mean to you?
The ability to do the things I want to do. I've never seen freedom as like the ability to own a super yacht. I don't see it as stuff like that. But if I have an idea that I'd like to do something, and I do differentiate between do and own, I don't really see ownership as being related to freedom. And often people try and assign freedom to ownership of stuff. I think that's not quite right. But freedom is the ability to do the things you want to do and to live your life the way you want to live it. For me, that's what it means. And so I can't imagine living in a place where, I'm scared of the police, where for the colour of my skin, for my sexuality, to not be able to go to the places I want to go to. I literally can't imagine that. And that, for me, is the ultimate definition of my freedom being taken away. Like, that makes me feel sick. So I have a physical need for freedom, the ability to walk the street, to go to the places I want to go to experience things I want to go to. And I would really struggle, I can tell you emotionally, I would really struggle if I didn't have that. And then the ability to do the things I want to do. So that's a step up from that. So, that Husky to the South Pole thing, that climb a mountain, that, run a company, sell a company, buy a company. Like, if I can imagine it and it gets me all excited. Freedom is, I want to be able to do it. No problem at all about working hard for it. No problem at all, actually. Sorry, there's an even further caveat on that. Freedom is the right to be able to aspire without, in a democratic, meritocratic way. So, like, I'm sort of saying I want the ability to buy a company, sell a company. Look, I don't expect to just wake up and get that stuff handed to me on a plate. I know I have to work at it. And the reason I jumped in with a caveat then is I went, oh yeah, but it might not be successful. And I'm like, oh yeah, but that's fine. Isn't that an interesting? It's not that I have to have it. It's just I have to have the right to be able to have it, to try for it, to fight for it. And I have to be able to succeed or fail based on rules I can see and choose to. The game's there. I can play the game. I can choose to. I can get there. The game is broadly fair. It's broadly meritocratic. For me, that's freedom. I don't know if I'm going to win chess, but the rules look perfectly reasonable to me. If I'm willing to play and I want to play, I'm prepared to lose, but freedom is the ability to play. I think being in a place where the rules move, the rules are fundamentally unfair, or the rules penalise certain types of people, or you don't have the means to play, or that is not having freedom for me. So I want the rules of the game to be broadly democratic and meritocratic mainly, I think I mean, and then I want to be able to aspire for it. I don't necessarily have to make it, but that's freedom for me.
Amen and amen. Okay. Who or what inspires you?
Me.
Of course.
Can we
You
cut
get another
that
answer.
My beagle inspires me. God love her. I don't give a lot of time looking at other people. I never have done, really. The strangest people inspire me. I mean, I always think people like Michelle Obama just look, and Kate Middleton, they just look so regal. It's like they were so comfortable being in those positions. I always look like a bit of an awkward sort of scraggy dog. Like I kind of fit in and I'm there, but I don't really. So I think they sort of float around looking more leadershipy than anyone else. So I find, and Oprah's the same. Like I find people that just sort of look very comfortable in their positions, just sort of fascinating. So I can spend a lot of time watching people like that. And then I love really bizarre people. I mean, they're all female characters, I guess, so maybe that says something. But Maggie Thatcher, for no other reason than her ability to be so disliked by just everyone and push on anyway, and to just survive. I mean, there was a saying that was, I mean, right up until she didn't, unfortunately, in her position in power, but just there's a saying which is, it's not about winning or losing in business, it's just staying in the game. And if you stay in the game long enough, you just outweigh everybody else. I mean, eventually everyone just takes too many risks and goes by the wayside. I've always found that a fascinating saying too. I'm not entirely sure I agree with it, but I think it's something I ponder, and I'm sort of fascinated by her ability to just keep going, even in the face of just broad disagreement, broad dislike.
Like a cockroach.
Yeah, completely. So I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time. I often get stumped when I'm asked who inspires me.
Next time, just say me.
I've set. Yeah, you inspire me. Actually, you do inspire me in a number of ways, because we've had this conversation. Yeah, completely. Yeah, no, you really, really do. My honest answer is, I've never taken. It's the same. It's all linked to the not really needing a. Actually, I need lots of thank yous. I just want to caveat the previous thing. You need to thank me when I cook you some nice food. But the well done's bit that I genuinely don't think I need or want, it's all part of the same spectrum. With at some point in my life, I set the definition of goodness in here, and I set the goals from in here. And therefore, every now and again, I'm like, oh, what's everyone else doing? Anyway, that's a distraction. I need to get back in my A game. So I don't spend a lot of time being inspired by other people. I don't spend any time on social media. I'm not broadly interested, is the net upshot in what everyone else is doing. I sort of never have been. So forgive me.
No, that's perfectly valid. And just for the record, so you don't need the well dones, but you need the thank yous.
Yes, I do need the thank yous.
There you go. Just correcting that, because when I write any notes up on this, so cat hair flying everywhere.
So it's like, you can thank me for nice food, but don't say well done for it being good.
Good to know. Right, final question. If I was a genie and could grant you one wish, what would it be?
I can't put that on public. I can't put it on public. It's nothing to do with work. What's a public version? Do you know what? I'd like to have the most epically successful hold period for a private equity backed company ever. I really would, actually. I've slightly got my feet on the ground, but up there in better than everyone expected territory, put it that way. But I have secret aspirations for it to be off the charts epic, but but you know, I am always grounded in reality so I tend to set myself achievable targets, but sort of, well, actually no, they're not achievable, they're unachievable, but sort of just within a whiff of you could if you found a way to kind of, and so for me, I have a definition of kind of what epic would be, and it's just out of reach currently. But I like just out of reach. I like my odds on just out of reach. So there's definitely a definition of what I'm going to achieve over the next 4 or 5 years, which I know when I'll get there, and I know how proud I'll feel at that, for sure. I have my own version of winning the Olympic 100 metres, and so that's really important to me. And then after that, I'm going to set my next set of goals. I like the period after hitting a goal where you can kind of go, oh, I've got a blank slate. What am I going to put? What am I, dust off that old list and decide what you're going to go after next. And yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that period. But yeah, I've got some personal ones that I'm not putting out on public bloody whatever, that social thing that I never participate in out there on the social net.
You know the question was wish, not goals. It's so funny how you managed to change that into goals.
What is a wish?
One wish.
What is wishing? There are goals? And
like you rub the genie.
No, that's all bollocks.
Euphemism. You rub the genie.
No, you employ the genie and then you go get shit done. Just give the genie more money and get to come work for you.
Personal wish. Anything.
Do you know what I'd wish for? I've got the most amazing group of friends, and the social disparity or the earnings disparity between the group is quite profound in places. And certainly when I die, I'm going to use my money to even some of that up. I know you're sitting there working out. Where am I on that scale?
When am I next coming to visit? Let's find a hill.
But I'm sort of bothered by it. Not enough to give them my monthly income, clearly, but
I want the house that you're living in. That's what I want.
Oh yeah, as long as you bring your furniture with you, you've got better taste than me. But just society is becoming. I'm more polarised by that, and that's certainly working in the energy sector. It's really palpable now, this pressure on earnings. And I know it's a very politicised thing at the moment, and so I'm not saying that for attention or context. I'm saying it because I see it in my own friendship group. Like, there's a big difference between some people's situations and others, and these are people that in many cases I grew up with, and it just doesn't quite feel right. So I'm not. Like I said, I have not dedicated my life to solving that problem, so I need to be kind of, honest and straight up with it. It obviously doesn't bother me that much, otherwise I really would be giving away my salary. So I want to put that in a context, but it bothers me enough that I find myself thinking about it a lot. So quite what I'll do about it in the long run, I'm not sure. But so if I had a wish, it would. I definitely don't wish for equality. Otherwise, I don't think anyone would aspire for anything, frankly. But I think there's a minimum standard of life which is slipping a bit in this country for some people that I don't think it should slip for. It's not that they're not trying and they've got great jobs, and it's just becoming very hard. So I think I would wish for that not to be true, but I think we are as a society going to go through a difficult economic period, and that is what it is. But I would wish that was not true if I could. There you go.
Amen. Sian
Can I go have some dinner now?
I literally can't believe we've been talking for 2.5 hours.
Is that
and I don't want to edit anything out.
Is it really? Oh my god!
Yeah, it's about that. That's insane.
That is insane. How have we been talking for that long?
It's been a pleasure. You've given us so many nuggets of wisdom and just advice.
This is going to be like that episode of 24. Did I tell you I was in an episode of 24? I was on set as an extra for like 16 hours or something all the way through the night. So many shots of like Keith Sutherland running past with a gun and me having to be like this. None of them.
Was that through me?
It might have been. It might have been. Actually, I was trying to think who got me on set. It might have been you. You're the sort of person who would have a contact.
Well, remember the person that I knew
Oh,
was
yes,
one of the main
of course.
characters. My dad was an extra on
Of
24 as well.
course.
From that.
Yes, it was you then. Oh my God, I totally forgot. I was telling this story to someone the other day and I couldn't remember how I'd got into it. So, but you know, they cut them all. And there is now, in one episode that's set in not Paddington, Euston Station. And it's I'm literally walking right along the back of the station. I think it's Euston Station, one of the stations. And I'm walking right along the back of the station with an umbrella, sort of walking along like an old English gentleman. And I mean, you have to stop, pause, just to get the precise moment. And I'm so far off, the only way you'd know it's me is because I know it's me. And like, that's it. They were all cut. So this is what's going to happen here. I'm waiting for it.
Can you remember what episode it was? I'm going to try and find it.
Yes, there is one. If I can find it, I've got it written down somewhere. It's all down to the station. There's one station. There's one episode
Find
that's set
in the clip
in this
and I'll stick
station.
it in this video.
Yeah, there you go.
With a big arrow.
Oh, it's Liverpool Street. It was Liverpool Street Station. There you go. Find
Brilliant.
the episode that was entirely set in Liverpool Street Station, and I think it's 3/4 of the way through. You will never know. I'm walking right at the back of the station, and they're like in the top concourse, and I'm down the escalators walking along. It's shocking. I was cheated.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You can enjoy your dinner.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
You're
Thank
the
you.
best hostess ever. You're a great interviewer.
Thanks.
Right, I'm out of here. See you later.
Cheers, love. Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to Tonix Femme for more conversations with real and powerful women giving you insights into their unique journeys to success. My name is Danielle Dodu. I am your host. Have a productive and fabulous day.